I've been carrying and shooting every day for the last 30 days with the Sony RX1R III. And I'm here now that the honeymoon phase is over to report my findings on this camera and share from my own personal experience as a professional shooter who commonly carries an A1 or even an A7CR. These are the cameras that I carry with me to jobs, but I always have an A7CR with me in my bag. But the problem is it's in my bag. It's always just big enough to where I don't want to carry it on me on a camera strap, or I don't want to have it sitting out because it's noticeably a bigger camera, especially if you put a lens on it that is not a very small compact lens. It looks like a nice camera, and so you don't just want to leave it sitting out. Whereas this camera is very unassuming, and I'll even talk about some instances where most people didn't even notice that I had a camera, and they're probably people that should have noticed. Now, before I jump in, you can see all of my favorite photos that I captured with the RX1R III at the link below. So while you hear me out, head on over to the website, check out those images. Let's first jump into some of the core insights that I had from shooting for 30 days with this camera. First of all, the portability changed the game for me. As I mentioned, I'd been shooting with bigger cameras, and I've been shooting with bigger cameras forever, and having a small compact camera is not something that I have carried with me since the RX100. Now, the RX100 was a fantastic camera that Sony produced many versions of over the years, but stopped producing new versions in 2019. That's when the last one came out, and I ended up selling mine not too long after because I just wasn't using it. And the main reasons there is the resolution of the image quality, and the overall autofocus performance on that camera was not nearly as good as the Sony cameras that I had. And so that camera just wasn't as responsive as what I had expected from my bigger cameras. But enter the RX1R III and its compact size. Yes, it is not as compact as something like an RX100, but it is the most compact full frame 60 megapixel camera on the market, and it brought back my desire to carry a camera with me every single day and shoot with it. Yes, I did need to challenge myself to do that because I have years and years of carrying a camera in a bag where the camera is out of sight, out of mind, and I don't end up pulling the camera out because I simply don't think about it. This camera is small enough to where I can carry it on me and it doesn't get in the way. When I'm driving, I can set it down in my car and I'm not worried about it toppling over because it doesn't fit anywhere. And honestly, I had my biggest revelation here as to the compact nature of this camera when I was shooting some pictures at a car show a couple of weeks ago. I had this camera around my neck, and there were a handful of other guys there with Sony A7 IIIs and a variety of different lenses and stuff. They're shooting different things. They're even talking to each other, not that they knew each other. And there I am with a camera that's technically better than theirs, with the exception of the fact that I didn't have the zoom range that they had. But nobody noticed what I had and what I was shooting with. And I actually loved that. I was able to get photos that I want without anybody asking questions, even assuming that I had anything powerful that I was shooting with. That was simply amazing. Now, if I saw somebody carrying one of these cameras, I would definitely notice because I'm not a noob. But with that, this is a casual carry camera that doesn't get in your way and still gives you the performance that you would expect, especially if you're someone like me who's used to higher end Sony cameras. My second insight is that with this camera, the Achilles heel of the camera really is the lens. This lens is over 10 years old, and a lot has changed with lenses. 10 years ago, Sony only had a handful of G Master lenses, and those lenses were revolutionary. Since then, Sony has continued to improve. Those are some of the fastest lenses out there, and all of their G Master lenses that they're producing have to keep up with their A9 line of cameras that shoot at amazingly high frame rates. While a lot of people were complaining about the lens, they weren't complaining necessarily about the autofocus performance. When you put this camera into continuous autofocus and try to shoot some action, it struggles to maintain focus on the subject. Now, when I tested this in a more controlled scenario, it worked just fine and I didn't see any issues. The first time I noticed it was when I was trying to take a burst of images of my daughter on the swing. This should be something pretty simple. She's looking at the camera the whole time, swinging back and forth. The camera should easily be able to maintain autofocus on the subject, but it failed to do so. So to test and make sure, I returned also with the Sony A7CR and the 35mm G Master lens on that camera, and in that same scenario, the A7CR was able to maintain autofocus without a problem. So this led me to testing some other things just to make sure that it wasn't an isolated incident. While I was at my son's soccer game, I tried to follow some close action where the camera camera struggled, and I also tried getting my dog to run around, in which autofocus struggled a bit there as well. Now, I noticed that it struggled a lot more when I would hit that C1 button to zoom in a little bit more to try to get closer to my action. Now, there actually isn't any zoom happening, it's just an in-camera crop, but it must be cropping at the sensor level because it seems that I'm no longer getting the full performance of the sensor in regards to autofocus. When I would shoot continuous at 35 millimeters, the performance was a lot better than when I zoomed in to 50 or 70 millimeters. And that's frustrating because if we zoom into 50 or 70 millimeters, we're not getting the full auto performance capabilities of this camera, which really limits the usefulness of being able to crop in like that. Now, I have owned the Leica Q3 since it first was released, and also owned the Leica Q3 III. So I have a lot of fresh experience with those cameras and shot a lot side by side with this camera because already owning the Q3, I needed to know whether or not the RX1R was going to be beneficial enough to keep. Now, you may have noticed my RX1R is here on the table and I don't have a Q3 on the table. That is because I sold the Q3. In just 30 days, I've been able to determine that the Sony is faster, more reliable, and $1,700 cheaper. But that still doesn't necessarily make this camera worth $5,100 here in the US. The honest math is you are paying a premium for miniaturization. An A7CR does 90% of what I've talked about in this video for half the price. Honestly, this camera only makes sense if you already have a workhorse camera. This is not going to be your workhorse. So who should buy this camera? First of all, if size isn't your priority, then save your money. There are far better things that you could buy cheaper than the RX1R. If you want to rediscover your joy for carrying a camera daily, a true daily carry camera that has the performance of the flagship cameras that you're used to owning and using, then it just might be worth it. Honestly, what this really made me want is a 2025 version of the RX100. So here's my final take. Is it worth $5,100? No. Am I keeping it? Yes. Why? Because it solved a problem that I didn't know that I had, making photography fun again. It's why I purchased the Leica Q3 and even the Leica Q3 III. I was chasing a desire to bring back the enjoyment of daily photography and carrying around something other than a smartphone. So you'll likely see some more content with this camera in the future. I think it's a great camera. It does come with a lot of caveats, which I've covered and many others have talked about the other wide range of things that you could potentially say is wrong or that are lacking in this particular camera. I can't argue with those. It really comes down to where you find your value. For me, that value is found in the compact and high performance nature of this camera. It's not perfect, but it's perfect enough. If you haven't already, don't forget to check out the link to my photo gallery of images with this camera. That will continue to grow with time as I have new favorites to add to it. So if you want to take part in my journey, make sure to not only subscribe to the YouTube channel here, but head on over to the 48 North website and subscribe there as well.